Good evening, everyone. The first school I studied in was a government-funded free school in a small village in the state of Andhra Pradesh, India. And the schooling experience was horrendous. Now let me give you a visual description first. Imagine an area half the size of the stage, right? With thatched roofs, with patches to the left uncovered, so that the sunlight would fall in occasionally as natural light. There was one teacher that taught us. One teacher for 3 classes, which made about 50 or so odd students. Now, none of you sitting in this room tonight understand how it feels to be in such a cramped, claustrophobic environment. And how would you? I'm guessing none of you have experienced that. Now, at the school I studied in India, the poor facilities and infrastructure gave rise to more challenges for the students' learning experience than to enhance their study environment. And this is especially noticeable in government-funded schools, where the lack of money provided by the government to improve these facilities, infrastructure, and even teaching staff decreases the value of education, decreases the quality of education. Now, by the obvious method, there can always be financial aid provided from external sources, such as NGOs, such as international schools like BSP. But there are other factors that are much harder to tackle. Now, what are these factors? It's factors such as the socioeconomic status of parents. It's factors such as the state government systems, gender inequality, caste systems, corruption. The list goes on. And all these factors keep the poverty cycle in a loop. Now, these kind of schools do not inspire progress or seek to empower individuals to a higher standing in society. Quite the opposite, in fact. It stifles innovation and is in general vastly unproductive. The parents, as much as students, begin to lose their trust in this dysfunctional education establishment. And why wouldn't they? The question would be, what's the need of education? What is the need? Anyone? You probably all have a good reason. You all know it. Because we in the Western world are quite aware of this. Education, at the end of the day, serves the purpose to help us attain a better livelihood. But if people start to lose their trust in the educational system, it cannot serve this purpose. Now, it's quite common in a lot of developing countries, especially in their rural areas. And I want to talk to you tonight about how we can improve our idea of helping these educational systems in these developing countries, but more focusing on their rural areas. Let me tell you something I was taken aback about 2 years ago. The village I studied in, I had a childhood neighbor who used to study with me. She was 1 year or 2 years older than me. A year or so after I left, she moved on to a local all-girls school, which was also government-funded and free. But 2 years ago, something happened. I found out, when I went to a visit to the village, that she dropped out of school. And somehow this shocked me quite a bit. It shocked me so much I asked my father, why did she drop out? And he told me her family couldn't afford to send her into further education. Because further education means going to college. And college, as we all know, requires money, a lot of money. The kind of money her family didn't have. But also, it wasn't their custom that girls were generally not expected or even encouraged to continue on into school. Because ultimately, they're destined to become housewives, destined to become mothers. And so are prepared for this kind of lifestyle at an earlier stage. So, in this case, it baffles me so much that our lives are so different. We both start our school lives in the very same place, in the very same village. Yet, we've had so much differences now. I've had the privilege to move to several different countries and study in one of the best schools. She didn't have the same privilege. However, her situation isn't a rare case ever. It's just a small example of those intangible factors I mentioned before that prevent children like her from continuing on into education. So I mean, in this case, even if the education system could be good, and even if in the locality free schools are available, is the attitudes that prevent children like her, especially girls, and hand in hand comes the issue of money. Now obviously, there has always been cases where people find money for things that they can't afford. If they see the importance of it. So the root problem here is that these rural and economically disadvantaged Indian communities do not value the education that's provided in their communities. And why is this the case? It's probably because it doesn't serve the community's purpose. It doesn't serve the community's needs. And also, the parents start to wonder why would they need to? Because they themselves haven't been able to benefit from the education system themselves, or they haven't been in it long enough to understand how it is. And like I said before, the education system wouldn't have served the purpose and the needs of the society in their community areas. But more on that later. The factors I mentioned before, such as society, communities, and the socioeconomic origins, average family income, parents' occupations. They're just a few examples of these factors that influence these attitudes. Here's an example of a graph published by the College Board, where it shows one of the examples of these factors I mentioned, family income. Now it's an obvious case over here. We all notice it in a lot of schools, where with the increase in family income, there's an increase in test scores with their children. Critical reading, math, and writing skills increase with family income. But this is really clear-cut evidence of how these socioeconomic origins of parents can affect the future academic success of these children. How do we eradicate this problem? How do outside organizations and local government people show the value and improve the educational prospects that is provided to these young children in their local area with these complex factors at work? So a few years ago, I studied about the education system in UK, and I stumbled upon the idea of the topic about vocational education. And I was also astonished about this, the fact that in countries like the UK, these developed countries, it's generally looked down upon, vocational education, by largely uninformed people, as they don't see it as equivalent to prestigious A-levels and IB examination. But vocational training is quite important, quite good, in fact, as it helps in providing essential work skills to young people and get them into the workforce quite quickly, quite easily than any other people, whoever goes into conventional education systems. Also, it's less expensive than your normal universities. So, therefore, less debt to students and greater freedom in income. Then it kind of struck me, why can't these vocational courses be introduced to areas such I studied in, like the village? So I researched, about it, and I stumbled upon this project called Sakshan, which is actually run in the capital city of New Delhi, in India. Now, Sakshan is a plan initiative. It's by the organization Plan India. And basically, it helps in providing work-oriented programs and courses for disadvantaged girls and boys from these resettlement areas around Delhi. And here's a little example of how it actually works.
My father did not want me to work, but now he's proud that I have the skills and confidence to support my family. That makes me proud too.
Now, Saksham actually targets groups, the age group from 18 to 25-year-old children. And they equip, especially girls, with the essential life and vocational skills to make them realize their dream. And not only that, but to make them representatives of a just, gender-just society. Projects such as these, however, need to broaden their region, need to be brought into the rest of the country. They're a great milestone for these young people. But however, they need to also be tailored into what these small communities probably want and probably will accept. For example, maybe sewing or nursing for girls can be taught at school rather than at home. Or maybe mechanical skills and agriculture for boys. Now I know, it sounds quite limiting and even sexist to us in our position of infinite privileges and options. But it is a valid way of showing the value of education and probably letting education be more accepted into the society. It might not very well support and maybe help that much our current generation, but it can in fact help the generations to follow, as it will help and ensure that the current generation are sustained. They have a sustainable job, they have a decent employment, and be able to provide a better education to their children. So I'd like to end with a little quote from this Lebanese poet to sum up my whole talk. Thank you.